So hi everyone, my name's Kaitlin Wojciak, and I think maybe it'll make sense for us each to introduce ourselves as we take on our section. So as Abby mentioned, I work for MS2 Extension and I'm a community food systems educator. I'm based in Southeast Michigan and do a lot of work with farm to school and farm to institution, part of which is this Making Michigan Recipes work series, which we'll talk more about throughout the presentation. So I'm going to get us started today with the webinar, and we're first going to talk about Michigan seasonality. And before we get started, we just wanted to share that this webinar is not going to focus very heavily on how or where to purchase Michigan products. Both of these topics will come up a little, but our main focus is going to be planning for and incorporating Michigan produce into your menu. So with that said, it's worth mentioning that there are a number of different ways of sourcing locally. For some meal programs, this might be working directly with a farmer. And for other programs, it might be choosing and purchasing locally grown products from your existing distributor, or beginning to work with a specialty distributor that focuses on providing Michigan products. All of these methods are considered locally purchasing, and they're all part of farm to school programs. So if you do have questions about how or where to purchase Michigan produce, later in this presentation we will touch on Cultivate Michigan, which is a resource that you can use to assist you with that process. So most of the information that we'll be sharing here today is adapted from a training and a set of resources called Making Michigan Recipes Work. We'll share where you can find these resources later on in the presentation and hope that you'll check them out. Throughout the webinar, you'll see pictures of these resources as they correspond to the content that we're covering. So with all that said, let's get started on how to use more Michigan products in your menu. As you probably know, we have a pretty short outdoor growing season in Michigan, and that can be framed as a challenge for schools and early child care programs to use Michigan produce. But while this is true, there are more and more opportunities to use Michigan produce for longer portions of the year due to storage, season extension, and preserved products. Let's talk through some of the options. So these options, as well as a Michigan-specific produce availability calendar, can be found in the Making Michigan Recipes Work seasonality resource, which is pictured on this slide. You can see the availability chart with the different colors there. So some Michigan foods have a short season, and we're probably all familiar with examples of those. And those foods are a really great opportunity to highlight them seasonally in your menu. Many Michigan fruits and vegetables are only available in fresh form for the short time during our growing season. And unfortunately, this is often when students are out of school for summer break. So some of these products, though, are becoming more available during the school year through companies like Pearson Foods that freeze Michigan produce in peak season to preserve their fresh flavors. Some ambitious schools and districts also freeze their own local foods in summer for use later in the school year. In times like that, staff will spend the day shucking, blanching, cutting, and freezing corn, for example, and then they can use that corn during the fall, winter, or spring in their meal programs. And it's also worth noting that short season Michigan foods are really great additions to summer meal programs. So in addition to these foods that we have available just for a short season, we have a lot of different options that are available for all or most of the school year, which sometimes surprises people. These are easy options to include on your menu as staples year-round. So some examples of those foods include carrots, garlic, leeks, mushrooms, potatoes, onions, parsnips, winter squash, sweet potatoes, turnips, and apples. And you can see these all on that availability chart that's pictured here. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these shorter season products are available more and more year-round, and that's because distributors are carrying frozen and dried options of vegetables and fruits that otherwise aren't available for very long. And this increases shorter season items availability to year-round. So some popular examples of those are dry beans, which we'll highlight more in this webinar, dried cherries, and frozen and processed winter squash. So then lastly, we just want to mention briefly a program called Hoop Houses for Health. And this is a program of the Michigan Farmers Market Association, and it's designed to increase access to good food for vulnerable families while increasing season extension capacity of Michigan farmers. Participating farmers can provide vegetables, fruit, and other food products as loan repayment to child nutrition programs at schools or districts that qualify for at least 50% free and reduced lunch and participate in USDA child nutrition programs. Early childhood programs can also receive food from Hoop Houses for Health if they participate in the USDA Child and Adult Food Care Program, or Minus Care, a Child and Adult Food Program, CACFP, and if they meet geographic free and reduced price eligibility requirements. So if you have questions about that particular program, Michigan Farm to School staff, like Abby, can help establish relationships between participating farmers and eligible schools and programs. So that is our introduction to Michigan seasonality. And we're going to move on now to talk about a couple examples. So throughout this presentation, we hope to bring the resources and information to life by applying it to two specific examples of Michigan produce. We chose carrots and dry beans because they represent one that's easier to use and one that's a little bit more challenging. They can both be sourced in a variety of ways from their form. For instance, carrots can come in fresh or frozen ways, and for beans, they can be dry or hydrated, and we'll talk more about those. And you can get both of these through direct connections with producers or through distributors. In terms of seasonality, Michigan carrots typically have a limited season when we're purchasing them fresh. Their season can be extended by sourcing from farmers that grow in hoop houses or that use other season extension techniques. They can also be processed and stored in a frozen form to use all year round. And Michigan dry beans are available all year round in dry form. That's kind of the nature of dry beans. So they are now able to be purchased in a hydrated form as well, which means that they require less preparation to use, which is great news for school meal programs. And then finally, in terms of sourcing, both of these products are available through a variety of outlets. Carrots are an item that it would be really quite reasonable to make a connection with a local farmer and work out an arrangement to purchase directly from them. This would probably make the most sense for smaller districts or early childcare programs that have smaller numbers, or maybe individual schools. For larger programs and districts, or for those that are short on bandwidth, which many of you are, it may make more sense to work through a distributor. So Michigan beans can also be sourced through distributors, which I just mentioned, some of which offer hydrated versions. And in addition to those distributors, we have a number of bean elevators and cooperatives in Michigan that can sell in large quantities. So that's good news. So you'll see both of these carrots and beans come up throughout the presentation for more examples. So now we're going to jump in and talk about some ideas, concrete ideas to use more Michigan products. So the first one that we're going to talk about is substitution. And you can see that the substitution ideas is found in the Making Michigan Recipes Work materials in this menu to tray guide on page 3. So you can find this after the webinar there. And, you know, sometimes a substitution can be as easy as using a local version of a vegetable or fruit that's already on your menu when it's in season. So another form of substitution is to use different local vegetables or fruits in the same recipe throughout the year, depending on when they're available locally. That does a couple of things. It offers flexibility to your local farmers to bring you a different but similar product if your original requested item is unavailable. And an example of this is that So you have a recipe for a salad, which calls for a total of 6 cups of leafy greens. The original recipe was written to use iceberg and romaine lettuce, but a school could substitute any other leafy green product, like field greens, kale, arugula, mesclun mix, or baby Swiss chard. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Amy, who's going to talk more about some specific examples from her experience.
I am a former school nutrition administrator, Grand Rapids Public Schools, and I also worked with some smaller districts. And I was asked by MSU Extension to work on this Making Michigan Recipes work from my experiences the last 5-10 years. So I am going to be talking about the 2 Michigan crop examples, beans and carrots. Schools, you're using baby carrots on your menu weekly, if not daily. Did you know that the baby carrots are the result of carrot processing? So they're pieces of bigger carrots that are unusable in their large form. So they get shaved down and made to look more uniform. Considering this, while carrots are in season in Michigan, it would be possible to serve carrots in the shredded, sliced, or even a carrot stick form in place of the baby carrot. If you serve shredded carrots as a salad ingredient or as a choice on your salad bar, consider serving Michigan carrots either in that shredded or chopped form. Carrots could also be on a seasonal rotation in certain dishes. Go beyond just serving them fresh or on the salad bar, but what about in a soup or a roasted vegetable or even a roasted vegetable blend? For dry beans, a required vegetable subgroup, which is one of our most challenging ones, consider substituting the Michigan beans for your canned beans. Switching from canned to dry does require some experimentation. Just like trying any other new recipe, you need to work through your staff, what training is necessary, and what equipment you will be using. You may want to start with those new quick cook beans that are produced by Pearson Foods. That's a Michigan company, and they are also available through the local broadline distributors. The cooking time is decreased using this quick cook bean, and there is no sorting or rinsing required. So consider at least one recipe on your menu, such as student favorites, baked beans, or a soup with dry beans, and you could serve those year-round. Other year-round ideas would be another favorite, refried beans, or black bean salsa. How about red beans and rice? Using dry beans as a protein source will reduce the cost of your entree because they are typically less expensive than purchasing meat. Michigan beans are easy to swap in Mexican dishes or salads. Another advantage of the dry over the canned is the lower sodium content. And that also is true for using the Pearson hydrated bean as well. Schools and other institutions may be able to achieve cost savings when you switch from canned beans to packaged dry beans for your recipes. You're eliminating those steps of opening, cleaning, and recycling cans. So you're going to result in labor savings. Although the overall process for using dry beans is longer because it requires the soaking and cooking time, staff members do not need to actively tend to those beans during this process, and their time can be used for other tasks. Again, a lot of experimentation. Next slide, please. So these ideas to use more Michigan products. Substituting should not impact the meal pattern requirements as long as you are mindful of the serving size and staying within the same vegetable subgroup. Depending on the recipe, preparation may need some minor adjustments based on cooking time of the vegetable that is being substituted. For example, asparagus would cook very quickly, while root vegetables would require a longer cooking time. We'll go to the next slide, please. So what's a harder swap? For harder switches with our 2 Michigan featured products, let's consider these ideas. If you are subbing carrots into a recipe, remember that they may have a longer cooking time than some other vegetables. For instance, if you are making a soup and replacing bell peppers with carrots while they are in season, carrots will need that longer cooking time than the peppers would. So of course they would be added earlier. Substituting dry beans for meat in a recipe will alter the cooking process. If you're using dry beans in a soup, you would need to identify the cooking process you will use. So a lot of prior planning. Beans might have to be soaked overnight or go through a quick soak process with boiling water in advance of starting the soup. If you have a steam jacketed kettle, this process of pre-soaking would probably not be necessary. And again, this is with the working from the dry bean. Now, several farmers have said if the beans are fresh, as in harvested this year, you could start cooking immediately and forgo that soaking process. Or I've had experience where we just started cooking up to 100 pounds at a time, and it might take longer. So maybe it's a 2-hour cooking process instead of 1.5 hours. So identify the cooking process if you're substituting the dry Michigan beans into another entree that uses meat as the protein. There is a Making Michigan Recipes Work video that will be released soon, and it will go through all these steps. Another advantage of cooking dry beans in place of meat is the elimination of animal fat. So if you're cooking with more beans and less meat, your grease traps will require less maintenance. There would be a time savings because you're not rinsing fat or draining fat or finding a place to store fat. Next slide, please. So these ideas to use more Michigan products. Cycle menus. A lot of cycle menus help you provide plenty of opportunities to use local foods in your meal program when they are in season. Just like restaurants, it is okay to include seasonal placeholders to allow for the rotation and use of products that are available at specific times. You just need to ensure that your menu is meeting all the USDA meal pattern requirements on a weekly basis. Plan ahead by the month, just as you would for holiday and other theme meals, by making note of which seasonal food you will use. Such as October, think roasted root vegetables. April and May, think spring mix, spinach, asparagus. And consider Michigan products year-round, but served in a different form. For example, fresh asparagus, when it's fresh and local and in season, and frozen, and that is available from Cherry Capital Foods, when not. So you could always have asparagus on your menu, and it can always be Michigan asparagus. It'll just be in different formats. Your cycle menu could change from a cold vegetable salad to a hot vegetable soup. Some Michigan foods are available for all or most of the school year, including carrots, garlic, leeks, mushrooms, onions, parsnips, potatoes, winter squash, and sweet potatoes, turnips, and apples. These can be staples on your cycle menu. Foods that have shorter seasons can be swapped on the menu cycle when they are available, or use the product in a different form. I think of blueberries. If you have blueberries on your cycle menu, they can be fresh when in season, and when not in season, they can be frozen or dried. If you're using a program such as Harvest of the Month or Oregon Wise Guys, which I'll talk about later, they can help plan the monthly Michigan food features ahead of time. Could you allow for substitutions in easy places like soups and side dishes? One way to do this is to include a seasonal vegetable. fruit, or side dish on your cycle menu to provide more flexibility. Again, plan ahead.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Mariel Borgman, and like Kaitlin, I am a community food systems educator with MSU Extension. So I'm going to start off by talking about how do we figure out how much to buy when we want to incorporate more Michigan foods into our menu. Where do we start? How do we know what's different from our distributors versus buying a local source, either from your distributor or from a farmer. So in this resource that's pictured on the slide, the Making Michigan Recipes Work Menu Planning Guide, there is a section on pages 8 through 11 that is called How Much to Expect. And this chart was developed using the USDA Food Buying Guide so that it shows you the serving size per meal contribution, and it can help you figure out the number of servings that you will get from some common wholesale produce units, such as a bushel. I want to make a note, though, that communication with your suppliers is really key. Whether you're working with a farmer directly or you're working with a distributor, you want to make sure you know how the produce will be packed, so that you can anticipate your needs and order correctly. So let's go through an example to demonstrate how you could use this chart to do that. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's say that you decide to purchase local carrots from a farmer in your area. So we'll use the how much to expect chart to figure out how many servings we can get from 1 unit of carrots so that we can see how much we need to buy. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh, thanks. Okay. Let's say with those carrots, you want to serve carrot sticks. So the first thing you'll do on that chart is locate carrots. And then after that, you look at the second column from the left. And you can see in that column what the wholesale pack sizes for carrots typically are. So you'll see that typically carrots are packaged either in film plastic bags, in mesh sacks, or in cartons that are holding 48 1-pound film bags. So there's 3 different pack types, and those, in this case for carrots, they all weigh 55 pounds. And again, be sure that you can confirm the pack size with your supplier, because although these are the typical sizes, there may be some variation among suppliers. So you definitely want to make sure that you know exactly what you're getting before you make your calculations. Next slide, please. Okay, so next we'll want to find the appropriate serving size for per meal contribution in the last column. So you'll notice that there are different lines for carrots, and that's because you can serve carrots a number of different ways. So we want to make sure that we're using the calculation for carrot sticks. So if you go to that last column, you'll see a serving size per meal contribution that says 1/4 cup raw vegetable strips. So that's what we want for carrot sticks. So we're going to look in that row. And one thing to note is that there's a note here that the figures are based on carrots with the greens removed. So sometimes when you're buying local produce, it'll have different parts on it than you would get from maybe your typical distributed carrots. So sometimes farmers will sell you the carrots with the carrot tops still attached. So you want to make sure if you're using this line item that the tops have been removed for that calculation to be accurate. So again, this is something that you'd want to confirm with your supplier. Okay, so we've got the row we need for the carrot sticks. So then we'll go over one more column, which will show the approximate number of servings that we can expect to get for that 155-pound unit. And we'll see that in this case, it's 566.5 servings. So once we know that information, we know how many mouths we have to feed, then we can easily figure out how many boxes of carrots that we need to order. Next slide, please. Okay. So we've mentioned this a few times when talking about making menu substitutions. So it's important to know, as we said, which vegetable subgroup we're looking at so that you can make sure you're making a substitution that still meets your meal pattern requirements. So this list is found on page 7 of the menu planning guide. And you'll see our carrots are there in the red-orange vegetable category. There's also a number of others to choose from. And then our beans are also listed up on this one in the beans and peas category. Next slide, please. So here's the rest of the subgroups, and you'll notice that many of our Michigan vegetables fall into the other vegetables category. It's worth noting that the meal pattern requires school programs to serve a half cup per week of vegetables in this category. So this is another great opportunity to incorporate delicious seasonal vegetables into your menu. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go on and talk about a few additional tools to help you with your planning and purchasing of local products, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kaitlin.
Hi again, thank you. So we're going to start, as Mariel said, we're just going to highlight a couple other resources beyond the Making Michigan Recipes Work kind of toolkit that might help you with some of the same questions that we're discussing today, or with some other topics that we didn't really get into. So I'm just going to start by talking about Cultivate Michigan. And Cultivate Michigan is a tool that can be used to plan seasonally based on the 4 featured foods that are highlighted for every season. Each featured food has a buying guide that shares information about where food is available, whether there are other forms like frozen or dried available, and item codes for large and regional distributors to make the Michigan grown products easier to locate. That can be an issue sometimes for folks to figure out which of our produce or other items are actually grown or processed here in Michigan. So this can be helpful for that. Each featured food also has a number of visual materials like posters and window clings that you can use to advertise your local products to your students or clients. So what you see on the slide here is the front of a purchasing guide, but it is also a poster, and then we have like a flyer size too. So these are all able to be found on the Cultivate Michigan website, which is on the slide there, cultivatemichigan.org, and they're free to download. So in addition to the information within the purchasing or the buying guide and the posters and the visual marketing materials, if you choose to sign up for Cultivate Michigan, you can track your local purchases through a tracking platform and some quarterly surveys that allow you to see and to share what percentage of your purchasing is local. So this is really great information to share with parents, clients, and the public, because you are supporting local agriculture and your community by investing in Michigan products. There are a number of webinars on the Cultivate Michigan website that explain more of the benefits of joining and signing up, and then how to do it if you're interested. And we can also take a couple questions at the end if you have any about this resource. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk about a couple other resources.
Okay, great. So you're serving all this wonderful Michigan food you've planned ahead. What other resources besides Cultivate Michigan can you use to send out to the teaching staff, parents, posters to put in your cafeteria? 2 very good ones are the Harvest of the Month, which is from Michigan Nutrition Network. It features 1 product per month, and it has supporting materials like posters and visuals. That website is michiganfitness.org/the word harvest and then hyphen a month. I always find it easy just to Google Harvest of the Month, but be aware that Harvest of the Month is used by different states, so make sure you have Michigan. So the Oregon Wise Guys have Foods of the Month, not always produce, but they also have more supporting materials like posters, newsletters, educational materials that can be used in the classroom or for your menus or sent home to parents. You may have to pay to access these materials, but their Foods of the Month are posted on their website, and that is OregonWiseGuys.com. So when featuring this food for a month, consider offering it in a different format. So if you're featuring cherries, try serving them in different ways every week. Fresh cherries one week, frozen the next, dried, and then maybe prepared in a crisper smoothie. That way the students have an opportunity to try that Michigan food in a different format. Dried beans could be offered in a soup, a salad, a main dish like a bean burrito, or a side dish like red beans and rice. Spinach, you could have fun with spinach in the spring, serve fresh as a salad, or cook them with eggs, call it eggs Florentine. Or how about celebrating Dr. Seuss's birthday with green eggs and ham? You'll be surprised at how much fun kids have with that. Or spinach dip, or spinach on pizza, farm to pizza. In fact, there's even an MSU curriculum that can go to the classroom on farm to pizza. And lastly, offer spinach in a sandwich wrap. That way students have an opportunity to see that food of the month in different formats. And lastly, either of these could be paired with what is popular in a lot of districts, Try It Tuesday, or something similar on it, but pick a specific day to feature this new food or this Michigan food. Encourage students to try something new on the menu. Have a taste test with a new Michigan product. Team Nutrition has free materials available, and they encourage trying new foods. Team Nutrition schools can order these materials for free, the I Tried It stickers and posters that support trying new foods. And that website is fns.usda.gov/TN, the word team hyphen and then nutrition. And again, if you just Google Team Nutrition, you'll find those materials. Thanks.
All right, so this is going to wrap up our presentation portion, but just wanted to share our contact information in case you have any questions about the resources that we've introduced you to in this webinar. All of the Making Michigan Recipes work resources are available to download for free on Cultivate Michigan's website, and the link is there. So you'll find, in addition to these resources that are pictured, you'll find student-tested recipes that were used in our hands-on training. We're also going to be adding training videos soon so that you can see some of those recipes being prepared and learn more about some of the knife skills and other things that were demonstrated in the hands-on portion of the training. So thank you so much for your time and attention today, and I think we have time to take some questions if you'd like to type those in the chat box.
So Kaitlin and Mariel, there was a question about if you know of any grants that are available for equipment like knives to prep Michigan foods. Are you guys familiar with anything?
Not off the top of my head, except for, I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but there was that grant that opened on January 10th that was for equipment specifically. And I think, Abby, that you sent it out in the Farm to School newsletter. It was sort of an odd opportunity in the sense that it was only the first 50 people that submitted applications would be considered. I forget who that was through.
Yeah, and I think it was for particular pieces of equipment. So they were like warming drawers and things like that. For those who aren't familiar with our My Farm to School grant program, That's a yearly application as well that's meant to support programs in purchasing more local food. And we do allow some of those funds. You can apply for up to $2,000 on a yearly basis. We do allow for some of those funds to be used for small equipment purchases like knives or cutting boards or food processors, things that might help utilize more local food. And you can find more about that. I'll put the link in the chat box there in just 1 second. That won't open until April or so.
I do think too that some of the grants that come out to support either school gardens or nutrition education have space for purchasing equipment for, like knives or things that you would be using to prepare fresh produce in your meal programs. It just might depend on how you frame it a little bit, but if you're framing it in an educational way, then you could use it for that purpose depending on the grant. I don't have a specific example in mind, but I think that's within the realm of possibility.
And there was also a question about how to get on the My Farm to School newsletter list. I can type that in right now. If you can either contact me at harperab@msu.edu, or if you go to our website, which is myfarmtoschool.msu.edu, you can type in your name and email address and get on our listserv there.
Abby, do you want to answer this question about the cherry slurp?
Yeah, okay, great. I did mean to put a slide here at the end that featured that. So for those of you who have heard about the Michigan Cherry Slurp, it is a one-day event that's coming up on Valentine's Day this year, which will be February 14th. And it's basically an opportunity to celebrate Michigan cherries. So for those of you who might have participated in the Apple Crunch in October, it's a similar concept where it's one day to host an event that features Michigan cherries and celebrate it with your school. It's a really great way to keep your farm to school activities going even into the winter, and a fun way to celebrate Valentine's Day with a healthy cherry treat. So the concept centers on slurping a Michigan cherry smoothie. And when you sign up at mycherryday.com, you'll get links to resources and tools to help you plan an event, as well as linking into sourcing to try and find dried and frozen cherries. We have our friends at Farm to Freezer are creating a special cherry smoothie blend that you can order, or you can order cherries through another source and create your own cherry creation. So I want to make sure you guys all know that there's a webinar on Thursday about the Michigan Cherry Slurp. It'll be a pretty short one just to kind of give an overview and answer any questions. I will include the link to that as well in the chat box, and there's also the link there to mycherryday.com is the web address for signing up for the Michigan Cherry Slurp. So we're encouraging institutions like schools and early childhood programs, as well as businesses, organizations, individuals, pretty much anyone who's interested in participating in that to register so that we get your numbers into our statewide count and host an event. And I will send out information on the webinar. Put that in the chat box in just one moment.
And I know some folks in southeastern Michigan school districts that I've talked to are really excited about it. Some of them don't have blenders in all of their schools, so they're not able to do a smoothie for all of their students. So there are other options too, which Abby may have mentioned, but you don't have to make a smoothie necessarily. So some folks are just going to serve dried cherries and highlight the fact that they're Michigan grown and a Great Michigan product rather than serving a smoothie.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we want to make sure it's accessible to all people in a way that they want to participate. So, you know, if it's easier for you to include dried cherries on your salad bar or make a cherry parfait or cherry muffins or some other cherry treat, we're encouraging everyone to kind of participate how they see fit. But regardless, all of our sourcing materials and marketing materials, which you should get when you sign up, help kind of source all kinds of cherries, not just the Slurp blend. So yeah, I know we've got a lot of excitement down here too, and we've got a few different people at MSU who are putting on events that we're hoping to get around to. There's another question that came through, Kaitlin. Any creative techniques that you've seen to gather and create a volunteer team during the summer months for processing and freezing seasonal produce for use in the school year? Whether you've seen suggestions from other schools that have succeeded at this type of program or anyone who's done that. Do either of you have thoughts on that one?
I'm trying to remember where we got the corn example from, because that was an example from Michigan. Or Amy, do you remember who that was?
Manistee Public Schools, and I believe Oxford.
Oxford is correct. Yeah. I think in Oxford's case, their staff were there, so it wasn't really a volunteer effort, and I believe that was, I guess it would have been towards the end of the summer, so it might have been before school was back in session, because I don't think they had a summer meal program. So perhaps in those weeks where staff come back before school is in session, and that. Melissa, is something that we could follow up on and get you more specific answers. I don't have the entire story off the top of my head. Do you have more information about Manistee's situation, Amy?
It was just something that they did, and I think Gaylord or Grayling too. I mean, around the state, folks have caught on to that, and a lot of them were employed in this summer. They had the staff available to do that. And the Manistee food service director is since retired, but I'm sure the staff there would if somebody wanted to reach out to them, they could. I'm thinking about Dan Gorman. He's a participant, and I think he's done some innovative things over this summer as well, or maybe it's school year.
Yeah, Dan's on the webinar too, so if you want to mention anything about what you, Dan, do. That'd be great. The other thing I've seen is we had our farm to school training this year up at Boyne Falls in Boyne Falls up north, and he advocated a lot using already scheduled meetings to take advantage of labor. And so he was saying during parent meetings or school staff meetings, he'd have everyone kind of having the meeting while peeling carrots and chopping up carrots and things like that. So if you can find a way to get people involved when they're already there for a reason. I know a lot of people tend to focus better if they have something mindless to do with their hands. So he thought that was a cool one.
And I also see, so a little while ago, Lynn shared another resource, and I just forwarded it in the chat box here, the Farm to School at the Traverse Bay Area Intermediate School District. So there's a link there. The timestamp is at 2:42, and they have another Harvest of the Month series with curriculum resources as well as food service director resources. Thank you for sharing that, Lynn.
And there was another question from Dan about the Cherry Slurp resources. As soon as you sign up, and I know you have, Dan, so if they haven't gotten to you yet, they will soon. But once you sign up for the Cherry Slurp, if you register at mycherryday.com, you will get all of the Cherry Slurp resources, which include links to our Cultivate Michigan sourcing guide, as well as some other tools for sourcing and a toolkit on how to plan a Cherry Slurp. So those should come to you once you've registered. And Dan, if you haven't gotten them after this, webinar, just shoot me an email quick and I can send those to you. And Dan said he focuses, so Dan Gorman from Montague focuses on utilizing students to help out in our program. So he said he didn't have any, not particularly engaging parents or staff volunteers during the summer. But are there any other questions from anyone while we're still on the line here? I got a few more minutes if people have other things they want to ask about. I also included the link earlier on to the Making Michigan Recipes Work website, which is also on the screen there. All of these resources are freely available to download there.
Great questions, folks. Thank you for being active and participating.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, I think we can close it here. Please do follow up with any of the panelists or myself afterwards if you have additional questions. We're here to support you all in your farm to school work. Thanks very much to Kaitlin and Mariel and Amy for being on today. And we'll look forward to seeing you all on the next one.
Good luck, everyone.